I think it's really important for democracy. The budget papers are the public's really one big chance to know what the government is spending money on and how much money it's spending. As our senior economist Matt Grudnoff loves to say, budgets are an indication of a government's priorities. And I think it'd be fair to say, based on this, one of the government's priorities is secrecy around deals that could be politically damaging.
One for Mum, one for Dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
Dead, buried, cremated.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
Australia's basically done for. We'll just end up being a third-rate economy. A banana republic.
How good is Australia?
Just follow the money.
G'day, and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast demystifying the big economic issues in Australia and putting them in plain English. I'm Ebony Bennett, Deputy Director at the Institute, and we're recording this on Tuesday, the 13th of October, 2020. Last week, the Treasurer delivered a budget with unprecedented spending and unprecedented debt, totalling more than $1 trillion in the coming years. But what is the government spending all those billions of dollars on? Don't taxpayers have a right to know how the government is spending our taxes?
Our economic recovery plan for Australia contains initiatives to create jobs and rebuild our economy.
Get ready for a federal budget unlike any other.
Which has been billed as the most important since World War II.
2020 is a year when everything is turned upside down. Vast debt is now, it seems okay, at least according to this government.
$507 billion in the most critical budget of a generation. I'm just going to say good morning to the Prime Minister walking behind us.
How are you?
How lovely to see you.
Then when those opposite thought the response was to build overpriced school halls, set fire to people's houses and send cheques to dead people and pets, Mr.
The Morrison government has committed unprecedented support, saving lives, cushioning the blow and helping Australians remain in work.
What we had last Tuesday night was a whole lot of pots of money created, many of which will be abused, and nothing to show for it, not a single reform agenda.
As a society, we shouldn't fear truth.
The media cannot investigate cover-ups if the government says you're not allowed to know.
The New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian today. She's set to face a grilling over the revelations yesterday at the ICAC that she had a secret 5-year relationship with Daryl Maguire. Meanwhile, in Queensland, the opposition leader Deb Frecklington has been referred to the state electoral watchdog by her own party over legal concerns about fundraising during her campaign to become Premier.
They had a plan for a federal ICAC in 2018. It was very close to being completed. It went to Cabinet. It should have been done then.
The only way the truth can come out.
Well, the Australia Institute did some analysis of the budget papers, and we found this budget is the most secretive budget ever delivered, with many expenditure measures kept secret from the public. So to talk about that, I'm joined by Rod Campbell, Research Director at the Australia Institute. G'day, Rod.
Hi, Eb.
Thanks for joining us today. Rod, tell me about what you've discovered in the budget papers this year.
Okay, so like all good Australian citizens, I was flicking through the budget papers, looking for things that were interesting, and there's loads of them. And some of the most interesting ones I kept finding had the words NFP written where there should have been some numbers, and that stands for not for publication. So there's a lot of things in the budget, things that the government spends our money on.
Like income tax cuts and incentives for business and all those other measures that are in the budget. They all come with numbers, right?
They all come with numbers, and the vast majority of things around health spending, education spending, most of those big headline numbers, there's a number there. Some numbers of millions or billions of dollars goes towards aged care or health or education. But in a whole lot of lines and line items, there's these mysterious letters NFP, not for publication. I started noticing quite a lot of those, and in the end started counting them up and comparing it to earlier budget papers. We looked back to 2007, 2008, so to before the last financial crisis. This budget definitely publishes less information or has more things that are not for publication than any budget since then.
So tell me, what are the numbers when you dug back into previous budget papers? How frequently would this not for publication, this NFP, appear?
Specifically, if you go to budget paper number 2, where a lot
I'm sure we'll all be turning to our personal budget papers.
No, I really think that citizens should at some stage just open it up and have a look. It's more interesting and more accessible than you'd think. And when you do open budget paper number 2, hit Control F and for find and tally up the numbers of not for publication. And this year you'll find that there were 348 times where the government decided not to publish a particular number. It's the new record. 2017-18 had 321. But if you go back to the last financial crisis, we're looking at 72, 68, in the 100, 102. There's been a really substantial increase between the early years of the decade and what's happening now.
And are there legitimate reasons why NFP might be in the budget papers?
Yeah, there definitely are some reasons why you might not want to publish things in the budget papers, and one of those is where negotiations are ongoing. So they are going to have to budget something, but with negotiations ongoing, it wouldn't be, it'd be difficult for governments to do that. And so if you look at our briefing note on this, people will see that 2012, 2013, there were a lot of NFP things there. There were 309. But 72 of those relate to a program that the federal government was negotiating with the Northern Territory around Indigenous welfare issues that crossed a lot of different portfolio areas around housing, education, health. And so there were a large number of programs affected. And so 72 times they said, relating to this one particular program, our negotiations are ongoing. We can't tell you how much we're going to spend on that yet.
So there are some legitimate reasons why it would appear, but are all the instances this year a case like that where there's ongoing negotiations?
No, definitely not. So other times where it could be legitimate relating to national security, you'll find that all of the ASIO, ASIS budget numbers are all not for publication. And while, sure, that relates to national security, I think it's problematic that we're not even allowed to know how much we spend on our national security agencies.
Yeah, and why shouldn't we be able to know that?
I don't think there's any... I can't imagine a reason. It's not like by disclosing what ASIO's budget is that you're saying what ASIO does or what its deepest, darkest secrets are and whether or not it's listening to our discussion right now. Hi, guys.
But they could be spending that money on anything.
I'm sure they're fans.
But we don't even know what the quantum is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So reasons that things aren't published in the budget papers, negotiations ongoing with another government, potentially national security, although that's being overblown in my view. And here's the kind of kicker, commercial in confidence.
Yeah, now that's one that I wanted to pick up on because that gets tossed around a lot in estimates, not just hidden in the budget papers. This idea that something is commercial in confidence and therefore can't be disclosed, it seems to me that it's used quite a lot. And one thing from your briefing note that I wanted to pick up was the Northern Endeavour. Is it a floating oil facility or a tanker? What are we talking about there?
It's an abandoned oil platform. It's like an oil rig. It was owned by Woodside Petroleum, the very large oil and gas company that has. Well, we could talk all afternoon about what Woodside has and hasn't done.
Ripped off the East Timorese.
Employed Alexander Downer after he instigated ASIS, national security.
Not one of our greatest corporate citizens,
Woodside.
No,
I think it's fair to say that in our view, Woodside is not one of our greatest corporate citizens. Anyhow, in this instance, Woodside owned the Northern Endeavour oil platform until a couple of years ago when they sold it on to a very small company that, surprise, surprise, went bankrupt And now several $100 million worth of rehabilitation effort has fallen to the taxpayer.
Because what happened to this Northern Endeavour facility?
Oh, it was getting old, and Woodside decided to sell it because presumably they didn't think it had a long production life ahead of it. This small company decided to buy it and take on, presumably for not very much money, and take on its rehabilitation liabilities, and on the off chance that things went well, the geology worked for them and energy prices went their way, maybe they could have made a mozza out of it. But it's an incredibly speculative kind of investment, and so this small company has bought it, gone bankrupt, and handballed this potential environmental disaster, or at best millions and millions of dollars worth of rehabilitation costs. That's gone on to the taxpayer, and you'll find it in budget paper number 2.
And so there's this oil platform that's a big potential environmental disaster, and the company's gone bankrupt, and so now taxpayers are on the hook, but we don't know how much we're on the hook for.
No, don't know. Not for publication, due to commercial and confidence sensitivities. That's fine. Move on.
So nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here that one of Australia's best-known oil companies sold this potential environmental disaster onto a penny dreadful company that's gone bankrupt, and now the taxpayer, in fact some great reporting on this by journalist Pete Milne, has looked at how we are actually now paying Woodside for advice on how to deal with the Northern Endeavour.
So Woodside sold this clunker to a business that subsequently went bankrupt, can't afford the liabilities that come with an ageing oil platform. Taxpayers are paying for that cleanup and remediation, but worse than that, we are paying Woodside, whose oil platform it was in the first place, paying them for their advice on how to manage this thing that they did not manage in the first place.
That is right.
Far out. And we have no idea how much they're paying Woodside for that advice either?
Well, we certainly don't know from the budget papers, because that's commercial in confidence.
Not for publication.
Not for publication. But in the media, there's an estimate that Woodside is charging $8.8 million for its advice on how the government should proceed.
Is this a good example of the types of things that could be hidden in this budget that don't really need to be? I mean, we're in the middle of a climate crisis. We've got this oil platform from a fossil fuel company that's being bailed out by the taxpayers, and, you know, we can't even know the price of that. I mean, what does that say about the budget, Rod?
It says that the budget has a whole lot of nasty things hiding in it, and I don't think that any of them would change any of the headline figures. I mean, this budget, we're talking expenditure and deficits, into the trillions. I don't think any of these measures are affecting the big headline grabbing numbers here. But there's all kinds of details around deals for Woodside, deals around the inland rail, court cases that the government's settling, like robo-debt. There's all these quite politically sensitive and really quite important in relation to governance. There's all these sneaky little items in there that are being glossed over with, in my view, completely unnecessary claims of commercial in confidence and being made unavailable for publication. And
why is it important that people should be able to know these things?
I think it's really important for democracy. The budget papers are the public's really one big chance to know what the government is spending money on and how much money it's spending. As our senior economist Matt Grudnoff loves to say, budgets are an indication of a government's priorities. And I think it'd be fair to say, based on this, one of the government's priorities is secrecy around deals that could be politically damaging.
Is there anything else that kind of troubled you reading the budget papers with this lens of secrecy?
In terms of other things that were considered not for publication, how much we're spending on the Inland Rail project, a project that's got a lot of problems around its business case, it's highly political, it's been pushed for by the Nationals, its route is very problematic, all of that is not for publication. It's not saying we're not going to publish how much we're paying individual contractors or something that might be building the railway line. We're saying in the budget is saying we're not going to tell you how much the government is giving to the government-owned company that will then commission all that work.
So there's not even any kind of commercial, that's all government-owned, government talking to itself and commissioning work from itself, and we still can't know.
Yeah, that's right. So the Australian Rail Track Corporation is entirely owned by the government, and in the budget papers, the Australian Rail Track Corporation gets an equity injection, and I quote, primarily to deliver the Inland Rail project. The financial implications of this measure are not for publication due to commercial sensitivities. So a transfer between the government and a government-owned company, and we're not allowed to know how much money that is worth.
Okay, anything else?
Almost anything to do with the Export Finance and Insurance Corporation, formerly known as EFIC. It's now Export Australia or Export Finance Australia. Its name changes a little bit depending on the branding and the bill or the act that you're reading. This is Australia's export credit agency. It manages billions of dollars worth of loans, and all of them using taxpayer money. We've been really critical of EFIC over the years because it's tended to back a lot of big mining projects that could have raised their own money, but were still big mining projects that have ended up in civil wars. The Panguna mine in Bougainville was heavily backed by EFIC's, or at least its predecessor, and the PNG LNG project, which has been really problematic. The PNG government has lost a lot of money. It's really it's contributed to a lot of conflict in the highland areas.
So quite damaging, not just environmentally, but damaging in other ways, resources projects EFIC backs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my favourite was the deal didn't go through in the end. I'd like to think we had a small part in it. But at one stage, EFIC was wanting to subsidise or offer a subsidised financial deal to a South African coal mine that would have competed with Australian coal mines. So EFIC is really problematic environmentally and in terms of its governance. It has contributed to wars, let alone environmental disasters, and anything to do with EFIC is not for publication in the budget.
Anything at all?
No, nothing.
Oh my goodness. What are the other special mentions?
Sorry, I've just got to go back to EFIC for a second. The government has established, I'm quoting here, the government has established a $500 million COVID-19 export capital facility to provide loans to export and tourism businesses, but the details of this you're not allowed to know about. So basically we're happy to have a big headline-grabbing figure like we're giving $500 million worth of assistance to our exporters and tourism businesses, but you're not going to get any more detail. A lot of those businesses happen to be the mining industry.
Right. So what's the take-home, Rod?
The take-home, I was only just warming up. You're also, and there was a great piece in Crikey covering some of this, you're also not allowed to know how much is the government looking to set aside to settle institutional child abuse claims. You're not allowed to know how much is being set aside to help Australians stuck overseas in relation to COVID. You're not allowed to know how much is being set aside to continue with the controversial cashless debit card. There's a whole bunch of policy areas across legal issues, welfare, energy issues that the government is trying to sweep under the carpet, and it's just not good enough. I think we really should be, whether that's the Australia Institute or an uprising of all budget-interested people, need to storm Parliament House or the Treasury Building or something, because not only is this just outrageous on face value, but it's getting worse. As we said, nowhere near this many measures were considered not for publication during the last financial crisis. Sure, this financial crisis might be worse in terms of depth, but this is a moment where faith in government is being tested, and I think it's a really bad sign that transparency around how much government is spending and on what is getting worse, not better. And certainly this week we've seen a bunch of government spending and corruption scandals in the media and in ICAC and various other forums. So we know trust is hard-earned and easily lost. And I mean, as I said right at the beginning, this budget is one of the biggest spending budgets we've ever had. There's a lot of taxpayers' money going out the door, but the secrecy is getting worse right at the moment. We need probably the most transparency. Yeah, and to see names of our favourite organisations like Woodside and EFIC, the intelligence agencies, all cropping up as you're not allowed to know how much money we're giving to these already pretty secretive and problematic organisations, I think it's a really bad sign. Well, we might wrap it up there. Thanks very much, Rod. Thanks, Heb. That's been a special episode of Follow the Money, and we're aiming to bring you shorter but more frequent episodes during the pandemic, so please stay tuned. You can check out our webinar series at tai.org.au/webinars, and don't forget it's not too late to register for the Australia Institute's Economics Academy with Richard Dennis and Matt Grudnoff. It's absolutely free, but registration is essential, so head to our website for that one. For the latest health information, you can check health.gov.au or listen to the ABC's excellent CoronaCast podcast, which comes out daily. You can visit tai.org.au for all our latest research and content, and we're on Twitter at the Oz Institute with an AUS. My Twitter handle is Ebony_Bennett with a _N_T. And Rod is at R_O_D_C. That's right, isn't it, Rod? Yeah, there's a lot of underscores. This episode was produced by Jennifer Macey, and our theme music is by Jonathan McFeat from Pulse and Thrum. Keep washing those hands, wear a mask, stay 1.5 metres away, pay your taxes, and thanks for listening.